Greetings, my name is Marco Pinkham. I'm the director of the Order and Mystery School of the Seven Rays, and I'll be your host during this two-part series on the return of the Serpents of Wisdom. We in the Order and Mystery School of the Seven Rays are dedicated to bringing you complete and easy to understand video presentations such as this one that as accurately as possible reveal the true history of the human race on Earth, much or most of which has over the ages been hidden. If you would like to be alerted of any new videos we produce, please click on the subscribe button below now. In this video presentation, I will offer you a synopsis of my book, The Return of the Serpents of Wisdom, which covers the history, teachings, and practices of enlightened masters who have manifested all over the world and been known as Serpents and Dragons. In each civilization, they were the first teachers of the gnostic alchemical path that leads to God realization, which is the realization that God exists within me as me. These serpents and dragons were also priests, kings, and builders of the great megalithic temples and pyramids that still exist in most of the ancient countries. And at one point, they created a worldwide dragon culture that completely encircled the globe. So I'll begin by identifying and defining who these serpents of wisdom have been, how they themselves achieved enlightenment, and then I'll move on to where they came from in the cosmos, where they first existed on Earth, and their dispersion to the countries around the planet. So let's get started. The first slide. Who are the Serpents of Wisdom? The Serpents of Wisdom are the enlightened masters who through alchemy have ignited the inner evolutionary serpent power or Kundalini and become completely consumed by it. They've moved the power throughout their bodies and up to their heads where it has activated their entire brain, thereby endowing them with both serpent power and serpent wisdom. They've achieved the highest consciousness a human can achieve, that of God realization, which is the realization that God exists within me as me. As the serpents of wisdom alchemically evolve, they unite the universal polarity within themselves as their opposing male-female energies, their water, their fire, and spirit and matter. These opposing energies unite as the inner alchemical serpent power that completely purifies and spiritually evolves them. Two universal symbols associated with spirit and matter are the bird and snake that are represented at either end of the Norse tree of life motif in the current slide. Within the body of a serpent of wisdom, the tree of life and the polarity of snake and bird exist as the human spine, which is the inner tree of life that has the serpent Kundalini at its base and the two wings of the bird at its top. These wings represent the two hemispheres of the brain that is completely activated when the upward ascending serpent Kundalini merges into the brain. The symbols of the serpents of wisdom typically represent the union of the snake and bird or spirit and matter that the adepts have achieved within themselves. Such unified motifs unite the symbol of matter, the snake, with symbols associated with spirit, which include the wings and feathers of a bird, as well as the blue and golden color The unified symbols of the Serpents of Wisdom thus take the form of feathered or winged snakes, golden snakes, as well as blue or golden dragons. Dragons are one version of winged snakes. The symbols of these Serpents of Wisdom also include the snake rising up the tree of life. This denotes the Kundalini serpent rising up the inner tree of life, spine. One version of this motif is the Caduceus of Mercury. The very top part of this motif was placed above the doorways of the Egyptian temples that were built by the Serpents of Wisdom to reveal that they were indeed places of serpent wisdom. Another symbol of the Serpents of Wisdom is the arisen serpent nailed to the cross. This symbol represents the immortal nature of the Serpents of Wisdom. Both the crucified serpent, which annually sheds its skin, as well as the crucifixion cross itself, are symbols which denote the victory over death and the immortality that the Serpents of Wisdom achieve. There are many specific functions of the Serpents of Wisdom on Earth. Here are but a few of them. They are the guardians of the secret mysteries. They are the teachers of the gnostic alchemical path, which is the path that uses the techniques of alchemy to achieve Gnostic consciousness and the realization of I am God. They are the initiators into spiritual life, and they are the activators of the inner Serpent Kundalini, which they awaken through a thought, word, look, or touch. The first Serpents of Wisdom arrived on Earth as star missionaries from other star systems and planets. Many came from a specific star region of the sky, which includes the constellation of Orion, the star Sirius, and the 7 stars of the Pleiades. The first Serpent of Wisdom. In many of the existing records of the ancients, there is a star missionary whose arrival on Earth precedes all the rest. Although he is known by numerous names, he is consistently said to have been the first to bring to Earth the Gnostic alchemical path that culminates in the activation of the inner serpent and leads to God realization. The Egyptian and Middle Eastern Gnostics remember this star missionary as the serpent on the tree in the Garden of Eden. This first Serpent of Wisdom was sent to Earth by his mother Sophia from her celestial home of the Pleiades, which the Gnostics referred to as the 7 pillars of Sophia. She sent her son to Earth to reveal to humans their divine nature. He came to our planet to reveal to us humans that God exists within us as us. The Sumerians remember this star missionary and serpent on the tree as Enki, the Lord of Wisdom, who taught humans the Gnostic alchemical path that leads to God realization. Enki was portrayed by the Sumerians as a serpent on a tree, as well as a man whose lower body is that of a snake. The Greeks remember the first Serpent of Wisdom as Dionysus, whose symbols include the thyrsus, which is a version of both the inner and outer serpent on the tree. The thyrsus was composed of a fennel stalk surmounted by a pine cone that symbolized the brain and the third eye of wisdom. And it had spiraling vines of ivory to denote the ascending serpent Kundalini. The leaves of the thyrsus also represent serpentine Dionysus as the green man, whose fertile serpentine power annually brought forth all the forms of nature. His counterpart in Egypt, Osiris, was similarly identified as both the Serpent of Wisdom and the Green Man, and he was typically painted in the Egyptian hieroglyphs and is in the green color. Two other manifestations of the first Serpent of Wisdom that were venerated as both Snake and the Green Man are the Peacock Angel of the Scythians and Sanat Kumara of the Hindus. In this slide, the Peacock and Snake forms of the Peacock Angel you'll see on the left, and the Peacock Riding Boy and Snake form of Sanat Kumara you'll see on the right. In this slide, Sanat Kumara assumes his six-headed form of Karttikeya. The name Karttikeya is derived from Karttikeya, a name of the Pleiades, and denotes son of the Pleiades. Although Karttikeya was born with 7 heads that correspond to the 7 stars of his mother, just like one of the stars of the 7 sisters that is invisible to the naked eye, one of the heads of Karttikeya is also invisible. The Osiris maintain that the Peacock Angel became the Green Man when he first arrived on Earth and then covered it with his etheric peacock plumes. When his plumes subsequently crystallized, they became all the colorful forms of nature. So a similar phenomenon is depicted in the Kabbalah, which shows the first Serpent of Wisdom spiraling down the universal tree of life that unites all the dimensions and all the worlds. As it descends, the serpent gradually crystallizes his bodily matrix of life force until it becomes completely physical at the bottom of the tree. The circle at the very bottom of the tree corresponds to the physical earth. When his feathers had become physical and the earth had become his new physical body, the Peacock Angel transmitted his spirit into the planet and then became what is known as the planetary logos, the mind and will of Earth. From that point onwards, everything that occurred both within the earth and upon its surface reflected the will of the Peacock Angel. By another name, the Peacock Angel had become the king of the world, whose will reigned supreme throughout the earth. In his role as the planetary logos and king of the world, the first Serpent of Wisdom could both monitor and guide the spiritual evolution of humanity. And here are depictions of three of these Serpents of Wisdom, first Serpents of Wisdom. You have Karttikeya on the left, you have Peacock Angel in the middle, and Osiris on the right. By essentially nailing himself to the earth, whose symbol is a cross inside a circle, the first Serpent of Wisdom became the first sacrifice savior of humanity. As the planetary logos and spirit of the earth, he literally took us upon his back and led us to enlightenment. The teachings of the first serpent began in the Garden of Eden. There was, however, not one Eden, but many. Most of them existed in the Royal Road of the King, which is a 20-degree band that encircles the earth, 30 degrees north latitude in its center. This band exists in the very center of the land masses that are situated around our planet. It's not the center of the earth, which is the equator, but the horizontal center of our planet's land masses. When the square mileage of the land masses above and below the 30 degrees north latitude parallel are computed, they both add up to 26 million square miles. The Royal Road of the King is important, not only because it marks the center of the Earth's land masses, but also because it is the location of the horizontal spine of our planet. Two of the Edens along the 20-degree band that are especially important mark the beginning and end of Earth's spine. These are Sedona, Arizona, and Mount Kailash, which also mark two of the Earth's largest vortexes, its root and crown chakras. Just as every human possesses 7 power centers known as chakras, so does the planetary logos and king of the world, whose physical body is the Earth. Just as the fiery serpent Kundalini exists in a human's root chakra, fiery red rocks and intense vortexual energy of Sedona, Arizona in North America serves as the root chakra of Earth. Just as a human crown chakra unites a person with everything in creation, the Earth's crown chakra of Mount Kailash unites it with all the planets and stars in the upper dimensions of the cosmos. Theoretically, Mount Kailash is the legendary Mount Muru, which is renowned in the East for uniting Earth with the heavens. Besides Sedona and Mount Kailash, within the 20-degree band are also the Edens of Eridu, which is the Eden of the Serpent Enki, as well as Lailash, the Eden of the Peacock Angel. There's also Giza, Egypt, which is the Eden of the Serpent Osiris, and Atlantis, which is the Eden of Dragon Neptune. Combined with these Edens on the royal road of the king are also other Edens that exist on vortexes that are outside of the band. These include Serendib, the Eden of Serpent Sanat, which is today known as the island of Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka was anciently known as Serendib when it was part of the Pacific continent of Lemuria. There is also Tiwanaku on the other side of the world, which is the Eden of Serpent Viracocha in South America, and Tamoanchan, the Eden of Serpent Quetzalcoatl in Mexico. Collectively, these Edens have been called Gardens of the Dragons because they all feature the planetary logos as a serpent on the tree, as well as the enlightened serpents and dragons that comprised his entourage. These planetary Edens, within and outside the royal road, did not all exist at the same time. Each arose at the beginning of a new cycle of time on Earth, when a new humanity was created to teach the wisdom that humanity would need during the ensuing cycle. The Eden of Lemuria, for example, was much more ancient than the Eden of Tiwanaku, which emerged following the planetary cataclysm that sunk Atlantis. Upon Lemuria, the Gnostic alchemical teachings taught on the continent formed the foundation of the Order of the Seven Rays. It was founded by the first Serpent of Wisdom to protect and disseminate these teachings. This is the same organization that much later in history became known properly as the Great White Brotherhood. Seven Rays of the Order of the Seven Rays refers to their origin in the Seven Sisters, as well as to the fact that the order descended from the archangels who first embodied the seven rays and brought them to Earth. Leading them to our planet was Sanat Karttikeya, who was a synthesis of all the rays, and known as the Lord of the Seven Rays. Here he is in the center of the slide. Both the Hopi and the Zedi version of the first serpent, which are Masao to the left of Karttikeya and the Peacock Angel to the right, they were also venerated for being the synthesis of the seven rays as their seven colors. You notice Masao has a rainbow head, with rainbow colors dotting his head, and the Osiris Peacock angel, his body is incorporated with all the 7 colors. The graduates and enlightened masters of the Order of the 7 Rays were known as Serpents and Dragons. They are also known as Siddhas, perfected masters. Siddhas were masters of the Serpent Power, and they achieved the highest Serpent Wisdom of God realization, which is the realization that God exists within me as me. From the various gardens of Eden around the planet, the Siddha Serpents of Wisdom traveled to high-powered vortexes on the Earth's grid, where they founded dragon kingdoms and served within them as dragon kings and the heads of the mystery school traditions. One Serpent of Wisdom of the Order of the 7 Rays on Lemuria was known as Aramu Muru or Muru, the Serpent Muru. He traveled from his Pacific homeland to the Andes with the records and power objects of his 7 Ray order. He founded the monastery of the 7 Rays to hold his Lemurian treasures. And then he traveled to a huge vortex that was built upon that he built upon a great city which he called Cusco, meaning navel of the earth. And from there he ruled his kingdom of the Incas as its first priest king, Manco Kapac. For many years, the Inca Empire flew the 7 Ray flag and observed the 7 levels of advancement in its 7 Ray mystery schools. On the other side of the world, a Siddha serpent named Agastya, a direct disciple of Karttikeya, traveled north from the Eden of Serendib into South India. In India, the Siddha Agastya founded lineages of Siddha Serpents of Wisdom, who in turn took the 7 Ray teachings around India and taught them within the many orders and schools of yoga they founded. One stream of Siddhas that had departed from Serendib were the gnostic Mandaeans. They were led west by serpent masters known as the Nasarai. The prefix of Nasarai is Nas, which means serpent. After leaving Serendib, the Mandaeans became members of the Sumerian and Egyptian civilizations, and they later merged with the Jewish Essenes to found the sect of Essene serpents known as the Nasoreans or the Nazarenes. Born into the sect was the Mandaean prophet John the Baptist, as well as his disciples Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and John the Apostle. Directly above Serendib, a similar westward migration occurred among adepts who were part of the Eden of Mount Kailash. These serpent adepts led a westward migration of the tribes of the Persians and their cousins, the Scythians. The Scythians identified themselves as the people of Shiva and considered themselves created from Shiva's locks, or Jats, and used as one of their names, Jatas, or Jats. Apparently, they were physically descended from Shiva's son, Sanat Kumara, and his entourage that oversaw Mount Kailash Eden. The Scythians' original home of Mount Kailash, which is featured in the picture on this slide, is the largest Shiva lingam in the world. The original name of the Scythians was the Sakas, or the Shakas, which means those of power. They were a tribe of dragons and serpents of wisdom who flew the dragon banner. Their special dragon powers and wisdom was especially on display when they later became the many magical tribes in Eastern and Northern Europe, including the Tuatha De Danann of Ireland. According to historians and mythologists, In the Eden of Atlantis, the serpent on the tree was Ladin, the guardian of the golden apples of wisdom. But he was also identified as Neptune, who has been acknowledged to be the Atlantean version of the Sumerian Enki and the Hindu Sanat Kumara. According to the legends of certain Native American tribes who claim to have originated on Atlantis, which they refer to as the Old Red Land, Neptune was lord of both land and sea, and therefore he was king of the entire world. In his terrestrial manifestation, he was Poseidon, the Earthshaker, whose homes included the inside of volcanoes, where he existed as the underworld fire serpent, the Earth's Kundalini. One of the animals sacred to Neptune was the fiery billy goat. Goat's sacrifice as a burnt offering to Neptune on Atlantis was later adopted by many other countries of the world. During the time of the destruction of Atlantis, Neptune and his worship were taken both east and west by missionaries of the Order of the Seven Rays, which on Atlantis had been known as the Order of the Kabiri. It was said that the Order of the Kabiri had been founded by the Kabiri twins, meaning those of fire, which are the twin sons of Neptune. Kabiri have been pictured as two boys, as well as the two serpents entwined on the caduceus of Mercury. The Kabiri missionaries sailed to their new homelands in ships with goats attached to their prows. In Egypt, Neptune was transformed into the god of fire, Ptah. And in Samaria, he became the goat-fish king of the world, Lord Enki. The goat pictured on this slide was recovered from the Egyptian desert. It had been attached to an ancient ship that once floated over the desert when it was completely covered by water. Many of the Kabiri missionaries who sailed east from Atlantis were members of a lineage of serpent masters known as the Thoth Hermes Masters. Members of this lineage were recognized to be embodiments of the power and wisdom of the primal serpent, which was also known to them by the name of Thoth Hermes. In Egypt, these Thoth Hermes Masters became the teachers and gurus of the Egyptian priests, and in both Egypt and some of the countries along the Asian coast, they also served as kings. Some of the Kabiri missionaries who traveled west from Atlantis found that an Eden in northern Mexico known as Timoanchan, which means the place where the people of the serpent landed. From Timoanchan, the serpent masters moved throughout Mexico and Central America while founding the dragon empires of the Olmecs, the Maya, and the Toltecs. Eventually, the dragon kingdoms founded by the serpents and dragons who had left their respective Edens completely encircled the globe. Together, they united as the worldwide dragon culture. The slide in front of you shows the dragon kingdoms of the worldwide dragon culture. The names of the different serpents and tribes that inhabited these dragon kingdoms is shown. In part 2 of this two-part series, I'll be covering many of the serpent and dragon tribes, including the Nagas of India, moon dragons of China, the adders and the dread of Britain, the Jinhai of Egypt, the Amados of Peru, and the Quetzalcoatlus of Mexico. The wisdom of this two-part series comes from my book, The Return of the Serpents of Wisdom. This two-part series will just barely be the tip of the iceberg of the wisdom that is contained within this book. So if you want a more complete history of the Serpents of Wisdom and their rights and where they came from, virtually everything about them, as well as their return now at this time in history, consider acquiring this book. It was first published back in 1997, and it is since that time it's become kind of the go-to book for people that are doing research about the ancient masters. It was republished about 3 years ago and revised and expanded, and it has much more information than the first book did. So if you have read the first book, I would still encourage you to get the revised and expanded edition of it. Now, if you are interested in doing so, please go to our website, www.sevenrayorder.com. And even if you aren't interested in the book, please come by and check out our website. So much of what we feature in the website are the teachings of this very first Serpent of Wisdom, the Gnostic alchemical path, as well as the teachings of the Serpents of Wisdom that have come since his first arrival here on Earth. Okay, well, this is the completion of part 1, and please consider watching part 2, which will go into much depth regarding the individual tribes of the Serpents of Wisdom. And if you haven't clicked the subscribe button below, please do that now. And thank you for watching. Namaste. Have a wonderful day.